Welcome. Today we're going to be talking all about the ABS. So I'm super excited to get started, and I'm going to begin with a quick little intro about myself. So for some context, I'm entering my third year of med school at University of Ottawa. For my undergrad, I studied at York University, where I studied biomedical science. And just some context for the interviews I got. I interviewed at Ottawa 2 times and then U of T 1 time. And then I got into Ottawa on my second interview time. My biggest tip when it comes to med school and applying for it is just trying to show them that you are going to be such a great doctor. And doing that means embodying being a well-rounded person that's taking care of yourself and pertaining to your passions. We're definitely going to go into how to do this specifically. And I do have a lot of experience with reviewing ABS profiles. So if at any point there's any questions and stuff, I'll try my best to answer from my experience. So a quick overview of what we'll go through. We'll break down what's the ABS and what exactly are these med schools looking for in this. And then we're going to talk about making your narrative when it comes to your resume and your whole application, and go into some specific writing tips for the ABS because it's kind of specific and it has categories. And then at the end, we'll wrap it up with a Q&A for any questions that you have. And I will be showing some examples in this. And I do mention it on the slide as well, but any examples you see obviously goes without saying, but do not copy anything, even a few series of words together. That will only harm your application in case you're caught for plagiarism. So starting off with what is the ABS? It stands for Autobiographical Sketch. So this is required for the Ontario medical schools, which you apply through OMSAS. There's 32 slots of stuff you can put. So if you have more than that, like there's nothing you can do about it. There's max 32. And some people say, oh, don't fill out all 32 spots. Some people say do it. To me, I'm like, I didn't really worry about the number. I just did my stuff. And then I ended up writing what I did. And I did end up filling up all spots. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, as if you genuinely did all of that. But there's no reason to do this. Like, you'll be okay too and have a great chance, even if you have like 28 entries. But I'd say usually like 25 or under would be like pretty less. So we'll go through the categories and you'll see how these sections add up. So there's 6 categories and they don't really make it clear what falls into what. So it kind of comes down to just us categorizing it. But there's 6 categories for employment, volunteering, extracurriculars, awards, research, and other. All med schools will look at these and whatever you put, with the exception of U Ottawa, which is only going to look at your top 3. So in each category, you're going to mark top 3 for Ottawa, and they'll look at those. I'll be going into examples of what you can put in these categories, and it's really up to you. So for example, let's say you are doing research over the summer. That can fall into multiple categories. Obviously, put research under research. And then if you were paid for it, you could put it under employment. And if you have, maybe you have like an award or a grant or won something from your research, you could put it under awards and accomplishments. So sometimes the same thing might end up being repeated in another section if it's a different thing you're talking about. So this is an example of what it looks like when you're on OMSAS and try and enter data into your ABS. So first, it's going to ask you to pick the category, and then it's going to say start date and then end date, or you say to present. So it is important that you remember like the month and year that you started stuff. And if you don't, like try your best to estimate. And you are also going to need someone to verify this. They're going to ask you for their phone number, email, and like an address. There is a chance they contact your verifiers. So this is just someone who can confirm that you actually did this specific task. So sometimes they email and like it'll be like, can you confirm this person did this? And they just click like yes or something. That's what I've heard of. For most of your roles, you're going to have a different one because usually it's like a different supervisor or someone for something. And your verifier, it has like a lot more info on the OMSAS website, but ideally it should be someone who kind of supervised you or you worked under. And if that's not possible, then you can ask a colleague that like you worked with directly and were at the same level. Then they ask you like a brief description of what you did, and they ask for location. And now here, what I think is really important is hours. So your start date and end date are important, but let's say you put 10 hours, that doesn't mean much. Like 10 hours is something like you can do in a day. Doing one day of something isn't necessarily something that they're going to care much about. So when it comes to putting stuff, try and focus on building as much hours as possible. And so when they say focus on quality over quantity, I think this is where it really matters, because it's hard to do a lot of hours in a bunch of thousand of different things. So kind of pick a few and really commit yourself. For me, for example, one of the organizations I volunteered with, I think I had like 2,000 hours with. And so I think that like spoke a lot to, how committed I was. And so I think this is something that can make you stand out as well. But of course, be honest. Like if you write VP of a club and you're writing like 500 hours, and that was like 1 year, that doesn't really make sense. So, try and keep track too before you're doing your ABS, so that when it comes time, you don't have to guess, etc. And then they will ask at what point of your education you did this. It is important that they're seeing kind of your improvement and building over time with their resume. So they will care more about stuff that's a bit recent. So like you can mention stuff you did in high school for sure on your ABS. It's anything you did above the age of 16. But if you're like 8 years from that now, they might not care as much as something you did 2 years ago. This 150 character description is the worst part, honestly, because 150 characters is almost nothing you'll see. But this is what they're really looking for, to see like what skills do you have. So we'll break that down now. What are they actually looking for in your ABS? So obviously this is just speculation. This is what I've learned and kind of understood from my experience. So starting off, I'm sure many of you have heard of the CanMeds framework, and if you haven't, now you do. So this is something that is repeated a lot in med school, and when you're an actual physician, they're looking for these skills kind of, because these skills are what makes a good physician. So for example, creativity, that is a great skill, but it's not as relevant in medicine as maybe leadership might be. So in that sense, I would say try and cater your ABS to show these skills. But with that being said, it's allegedly very frowned upon to kind of use these buzzwords without describing it. And I'll show you examples of this. But for example, don't say, as VP, I collaborated with a team and I was professional. You just put the CanMed descriptions, but you didn't say anything about how. So instead, you can maybe say, as a VP, I maintained constant communication with my teammates and always checked in on their wellness to make sure team morale was good. I don't know. You get more specific, and so you're demonstrating these qualities, but not necessarily saying the word, if that makes sense. And now I'll go through the categories. So starting off with employment. So first of all, in these 6 categories, I do recommend that you have at least 2 things in each category, ideally 3 if you're applying to Ottawa. But at some point, if you've never done something that's like you've been paid for or employed for by this point, then that's something you should start looking to incorporate, just so you have something to put in that category. But in my opinion, I think the reason they're asking for employment is because, first of all, it shows that you have good skills that make you employable. Someone else wants to work with you. And also, employment is not our main job right now. Like, we are also students going through other courses and stuff. And so just having any employment alone is like a big achievement for time management and everything. And so this is a good opportunity to show that you can balance things. So many people, from what I've seen, usually will do their employment in the summer. Usually it's in the form of research or some job at the university. Summer is the best time typically to get a job because during the school year, it might be very difficult to handle having a job on top of it. But if you can do that, that builds a really good narrative that you can balance. So for example, let's say you have two people that have a 4.0 and one of them has a 4.0, the other one has a 4.0 but also works at Starbucks. So that person would be considered more impressive just because they maintain that while also doing this thing. So it's kind of just adding to your plate. And there's so many jobs out there that it really doesn't matter what you do. But some examples I've seen is I wrote front desk. I don't know why I wrote front desk. I meant like for a front desk for a clinic, like, medical clinic, dental clinic, whatever, or any retail job, like a clothing store or food store. And I'm personally a big fan of these jobs because I worked at Starbucks and I talked a lot about how interacting with customers taught me how to interact with patients. And then maybe you can like coach people on a certain sport you're good at, or maybe you are lifeguard certified. There's also a lot of jobs at your university. Like for me, I worked at my university library. There's also like academic assistants, like people that can help with choosing courses. There's a lot of jobs within your university itself for students. So I would say look at your university's job portal. These are things that will be very helpful to talk about transferable skills. And sometimes your employment can be clinical. I've heard like some people get a medical scribe certification where it's not too long and then they can work in hospitals. So maybe you could also look into something like that where you can work in a hospital or be admin for a hospital to get some more experience in that. So for when it comes to volunteering, I think this is a great chance for you to show like a population that you're passionate about, that you are actually like very knowledgeable about how to interact with them. So I think in med school, everyone has like a certain population they're very passionate about. For example, one person might really care about trans people. One person might really care about the 2S LGBTQ plus population. Someone else might really like the elderly or immigrants or refugees, or there's so many different categories. And so picking one that's like meaningful to you and going with that, or just any opportunity you come across, is a great thing you can talk about. Because let's say you volunteered with someone who had like a developmental disorder. Now, when you have a patient with that, you'll be much more equipped. So that is something that would impress them. It's also important that you have a why for why this group. And sometimes that will develop as you're doing it. But there's just so many opportunities out there. So I'd say it's also a matter of looking deep into things. There's a lot of volunteer portals. If you search up like volunteer portal Toronto, a bunch come up. And you can also work your way up. Like, for example, starting off as a hospital volunteer. I know some people have then worked their way up to getting a job in the hospital just because they volunteered, they got their name out there. So some things I have seen people do for volunteering is some people have like worked with kids with autism or developmental disorders or Down syndrome, or people with any disability. For example, I volunteered with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, CNIB. And so I volunteered with an individual who was blind and learned a lot about interacting with people with vision loss. There's also like the deaf population. And volunteering at a hospital is a very basic one that a lot of people do, but make sure you're making it clear how you're unique and how you went above and beyond in this role. And if you did honestly not really do much in your volunteering role, it might not be worth adding, dare I say. But with volunteering, I'd say hours, it's also really important because it's showing how much you care about this cause and how much you gave back to the community. So another category is research. I've been asked a lot, like, is it okay if my research is in psychology or something else? Literally does not matter whatever your research is, like, do anything. When it comes to getting research, honestly, like, I know everyone says this, but cold emailing is like your best chance. I know of like someone I saw, she cold emailed like different universities and she ended up getting one in like the Yukon territories, even though she's like from Toronto. So like you could even email outside of your university if none of the university profs you called emailed replied to you, you know. But if you don't have research, I would say it's just a matter of taking the initiative to reach out to people and like follow up a lot so they see that you really want this. Also, when you're doing research, there's a lot of different types of ways you can contribute. For example, you might just be someone who sits in on the lab meetings, or you might be someone who like washes the dishes, or you could be like conducting your own experiments. And so obviously the more responsibility you can have, the better. And when you have like your own research that you are conducting, that also allows you to then present at conferences and stuff, and that opens up a lot of awards and stuff you can get. Ideally, I would say try and cater your research to, if you know, a subspecialty that you want to pursue in medicine. Like, for example, I was really interested in OB-GYN, so I did some OB-GYN, like obstetrics research when I was in university. This doesn't have to be the case. Like, I started off with like bacteria research that I really didn't resonate with, but I was like, any experience I'll take. So you can also work your way up to a field that you're interested in. There are also many student-led conferences that happen at universities. So I'd say try and find different conferences to present at, because that is a really good thing to add to your awards and accomplishments section, which I will talk about next. So in general, some people that have this section empty, I've heard they're like, why do I have to do something for research? I don't get it. And honestly, I did feel this way, I think, until I got into med school and started doing research alongside med school, that I saw the importance of it. But I think the reason that they're asking you to do research is because research is kind of how we keep evolving and trying new things and making like our new standard for medicine. And as you know, in medicine, it's ever changing. So you have to be a lifelong learner in order to do that and keep up with, you know, the best treatment for your patients and everything. You have to be able to understand research, and understanding something is done best when you've actually done it. So if you are someone who's like worked on your own research and disseminated it, you're going to be much better to critically analyze and understand other research, and that's just going to help your patient outcomes improve. So research and understanding it is actually really important. And in med school, it got a bit tough getting research compared to undergrad, because when you're in university, you're applying against other university students to get research. But when you're in med school and you're applying for research, you're applying against med students, and a lot of those people might have a PhD or a master's. I would say take advantage of university research as much as you can. And if you graduate without research experience, I would say it's not a bad idea to look into a research-based master's. So this section, some things you can mention are any scholarships you got or school awards, especially when you're graduating. If you're applying to med school after, there's a lot of grad awards that you can get, or like awards in your faculty for commitment to community and stuff like that. Also, if you can go to research conferences and like hopefully maybe win one, that would be a really good thing to show too. But of course, it's not necessary. These are just some things that can make you stand out. And when they ask for the awards and accomplishments section, they're going to ask you what the award was, and they're also going to ask who was your competition involved. Because let's say you got third place when there was 3 people, obviously doesn't mean much compared to when you got third place and there was 100 people. Let's say you got a scholarship for getting an average above 90%. For competition involved, you can put given to students with the top GPA out of all students in the faculty. So like make sure to emphasize for this stuff that like you want it compared to like a lot of other people. And if an award was nomination based, how would you go about that? Say you applied for an award for community service in your faculty. I just like Googled York University Faculty of Science, and I put the whole faculty, like I put all the students, because like technically like they all could have applied, you know? So I'd say when you don't know, you can put like your whole student population. And what if you don't have any? Do you leave that section blank? No, you go and seek an opportunity where you can get an award or accomplishment, because you don't want to leave any section blank. So It's okay. That just means you need to spend a bit more time building your ABS, but you do not want to leave things blank. And this section can really make you stand out if it's strong, and it doesn't hurt if it's like a bit weaker, but it being empty would, I think, be very negative to your profile. So extracurriculars is, I think, the most diverse in variety of what you can do. And it's a great chance for you to show your passions and hobbies while showing some good CanMed roles like collaboration and leadership. If you don't know where to start for clubs, I'd say two categories that I like are one thing that's about like advocacy. So usually some sort of student council, being any role in student council, I think is a great way for you to advocate for your student body. And then another one where you took a lot of initiative to lead things and maybe innovate. So this can be anything. Like, let's say you joined the salsa dancing club. It would be a really cool thing if maybe you organized a whole like dancing night. You can talk about that and like took initiative, leadership. Those would be great skills to highlight. So you also want to speak specific, you want to seek specific like experiences that you can talk about. So I'd say definitely, once again, quality over quantity. They're going to ask for hours and they're going to ask what you did. They don't care about like having a billion clubs. If you have 3 that you're like an exec for, I would say that's a lot and that's great. And once again, I would say focus on having a long-term commitment. If you just started a club in May and you're applying for this cycle, for example, you've done this club for like 3 months so far. So it's great that you're doing it right now, but you just haven't done enough experience to like stand out to them right now. So I would say try and focus on like also stuff that you have a longer hour commitment to. And when it comes to types of stuff you can do, like I said, there's a lot of different types of extracurriculars and many different things fall into this category. Some of the most common stuff I've seen is any type of physical stuff, like being in an intramural or sport team or dance team, for example, something musical, like being in a band or musical group. But I would say, for example, let's say you play piano for fun, you can't really put that under extracurriculars because it's not necessarily like a club with other people. But if you are like part of a piano group that meets every Saturday and plays, then you could write that. Try and make sure that like if you have some things you can't necessarily mention, you can try and find a way to mention it. So another good example is like musical theater or a club that raises for any nonprofit. Also, like I've seen a lot of research clubs, like sometimes they'll read papers together, or there's other clubs to help people get research, or clubs that organize conferences. There's so many extracurriculars out there. And a lot of people do also start their own club. And to be so honest, I think in university, there probably is not a big need for you to start a club because there's just so many clubs out there. But at the same time, I can't lie that the idea of putting founder for something on your application just involves a lot of skills that are very good to highlight, because starting something from scratch, executing an idea, and turning it into action, I think is something that's very impressive rather than joining something that already exists. But I'd say don't do this unless it's something you're very, very passionate about actually, and like you're willing to put in the effort. So if you are thinking about joining your own club, starting your own club, here's a quick little to do from my experience. First things first, universities, if you want to be like an official club, they have a process called ratification. This process is only helpful because they give you money after you're ratified. However, this process also is very tedious. They ask you for a lot of specific stuff, like your club needs a constitution, it needs bylaws of voting and stuff. I personally, like in med school, started a club and I realized I didn't really need the ratification at all because we were just volunteers. We didn't need any money. So I just skipped that process and it was great for my mental wellness. But it is a great thing just because you do get access to university resources as well. So step 1, identify your club, your niche, and make sure there's no other club that kind of does this. Even if it's a little bit similar, it's going to be hard to recruit people when something already similar exists. And make sure that you have some personal connection to this. So me, for example, I started a club where we do makeup in retirement homes on the elderly. And that's because I'm really passionate about the geriatric population. And I'm also like really into makeup and nails and stuff. So I kind of combine my two passions, and that's very personal to me. Next thing you do once you have your idea is like, make a logo, make an intro post, and start an Instagram page and just start following people from your university. And people will start following you back. You'll gain some traction. And honestly, I found Instagram is the best way for your club to gain people to be involved in communication and stuff. And once you have gained like a good amount of Instagram followers, like maybe like 150, you can post you're recruiting for a team. And then from there, you can get a team and you can all start talking about how to execute your vision. It's not as hard as it might sound. I think once I did it, I was like, this wasn't terrible. Moving on to the last category, other. Pretty random. Honestly, there's not really much info we have about this. I've seen some pretty funny stuff been put on other, like being the youngest or oldest sibling, but there's definitely skills associated with that. Or if you play an instrument or sport for fun, but you're not a part of like an actual official team, then you can put this here. Some people also put like religious commitments in other, but I'd say you can also put that under volunteering if it falls under it. And I've seen is like putting, if you have like some sort of content creating or social media, like if you have a YouTube account, or like me, I have the Instagram, I can put that. I have heard of many people that leave this blank. I don't think that's an issue at all, but I feel like if there's the chance and you have spots, and if you haven't filled up all 32, then, why not show something to show a little bit more about yourself. So here's some secrets, super secrets. So for example, let's say I volunteered at the hospital summer of 2019, and then the summer of 2023. On an OMSAS, there's no way for me to indicate that I had a break. So I'm just going to put 2019 to 2023. And I'm not lying. And the hours will still correspond to that. But in their mind, that seems like a longer commitment because it's like 5 years or whatever. So like I know some people will start a club in first year, not think about that club for second and third year, and then go back to that club in fourth year, and then they act like they did it for all of university. Secrets. It's like not the best thing, but like you're not lying. You can't put a break on OMSAS. So, there's some ways to be a little like boosted a little without being unethical. Also, I noticed that, the titles of clubs are not really regulated. Like some clubs will have like 3 or 4 presidents, like co-presidents, and like other clubs will have 1. And then like some clubs will have like a billion VPs and they like categorize it. So if you can, maybe try and ask to change your roles from like director of marketing to VP marketing, for example, just because I think the term vice president sounds really fancy and leadership like. But yeah, sneaky ways with that too. And then I have heard this question a lot. Like there might be something you did that you genuinely lost the contact for. And so I'd say for like maybe one thing, you can allow yourself to have a verifier that's not actually that person, but it's like a friend that can confirm you did this. But do not do this more than for like 1 or 2, because they also do contact them, like I mentioned, and you don't want to put the same person for anything unless it was like the same thing that you're repeating. So just make sure to be very careful with your verifiers, but 1 or 2 leeway should be fine. And now I've talked a lot about what they're looking for and types of things you can do. But I think the most important thing that comes down to it is that when they look at your ABS and read through all of it, what is the story that they see about you? So for example, let's say we have a student that volunteers for UNICEF and also volunteers to pick up garbage on the weekend, and they're a part of their school's eco club. This person is giving very like, I care about the environment. So that is maybe a narrative you want to build. Like a good one, I think, is like showing that you like leadership or teamwork, or mentorship or something. So building a story. So you want to have a story that shows that you're well-rounded and that you work hard. When it comes down to them asking, okay, why did you do this research? If you just said, because there's a research category on the ABS, like that makes no sense. Find a reason, find a personal connection. Oh, research is so important to me because as I started to understand research papers, I actually noticed that I was doing better in class, and I realized how it's the foundation of science. Because they will be asking you this stuff in your interview, or that's what they're looking for. And then try and have a combination of academic and creative stuff, and that comes into being well-rounded. Like I'd say try and have one artsy or physical thing. I saw a lot of people in med school are very into a specific sport or into a specific art type. And that was something I saw a lot. So like for me, for example, I talked a lot about music in my application. And I'd say if you were to take your ABS and like write it all into one paragraph, what story does it give? Like, let's say the stuff you're doing right now is you're a general member for 2 clubs, you work at Tim Hortons, and you volunteer at the food bank. It doesn't necessarily sound like a story to me right now, but it could be a story to someone because whatever circumstances led to them doing this exact stuff, so I can't necessarily tell you how to build your story, but I'll give you an example of kind of how I did it. So this is third person, but it's about me. Aleeza and her family moved to Canada for a better education, and that instilled lots of curiosity in her. She explores her curiosity through playing piano and doing research on Alzheimer's disease. Moreover, Aleeza joined the Science Student Caucus to advocate for student needs after seeing how mental health was not firsthand prioritized for herself and her peers. Aleeza had to work 2 jobs simultaneously during her undergrad, but it taught her how to be resilient and time manage in the busiest of times. She worked at Starbucks, where she enjoyed chatting with customers all day, and she worked at the library, where she was in her element surrounded by books. The impression I was trying to give is that I really value hard work and wellness, like education. So if you are someone that has an experience, like you're an immigrant or your parents are an immigrant, or you have a culture that you really resonate with, or like I'm the youngest, I talked about being the youngest and how that made me passionate about mentorship. Think about little ways in your life and your story to incorporate that into your ABS, because you'll see that, this is what shapes your life. And so making that clear narrative is very helpful for yourself.
If you are feeling a bit confused, I do have like a written guide, because I know like everyone has a different way of learning, and like maybe you'll read it and you have a better idea. But that's one of the things that I'm gonna be passing to you guys after the session. So if anything, you can read through that, and if you have questions, you can reach out again too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sormay. So yeah, that also has goes into more detail about your building your narrative. So definitely check that out. So now we'll go into specific writing tips. So this is for the responsibility section, where you have the 150 characters, because 150 characters is very limited. So I'm going to start off by showing an example. So I used to work at Starbucks. So let's say I put this: make drinks for customers in a professional and friendly manner while communicating in a busy team setting and advocating for my coworkers' health. In the chat, let me know what y'all like about this, what you don't like about this. And this one still has like 4 characters to go. We're under the limit. Yeah, I like how it shows you worked in a high-paced environment. Definitely talking about being in a busy team setting. And that's very relevant to being a physician as well. So that's a good skill to highlight. A lot of CanMed words. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it mentions the keywords, but doesn't say how much. So yeah, these are great points. It has some very relevant skills, but let's break down. So first of all, make drinks for customers. This is something everyone does, every barista. You want to always highlight how are you special in this role. So add something else, make drinks for customers, or say engage with customers, being friendly while making drinks or something, you know? But don't just say I made drinks. And in this sense, you said a friendly and professional manner, but I didn't demonstrate. How was I professional? You know, saying I was professional is one thing, but talking about it, like I could talk about how I maintain boundaries, make sure to stay calm when customers were upset, and I made sure to actively listen. Stuff like that would show that I'm professional without saying it. And then saying while communicating, once again, it's just a buzzword, but you need to talk about what is special about your communication. Like maybe it's very adaptable, maybe it's very concise. So think about that and add some more detail. And then here, advocating for my coworkers' health. That just was given no explanation of how. So this to me is something maybe I would see on like a LinkedIn job description. Hey, we're looking for someone to make drinks for customers, be friendly and professional while communicating. Like, this is very vague, I'd say. So there's ways to make this better. So I'll show an example of what I would think would be better, and maybe that might answer your question. So instead, you could say, handcraft drinks, took initiative building engaging customer relationships, upkept team morale, especially when busy, required organization and memorizing 1,000+ recipes. So here I'm showing I took initiative. I was engaging with customers. I was a great team member because I made sure the team morale was good. I worked in a busy environment and I was a good team member during that. Required organization isn't the best, but like memorizing 100+ recipes, that's showing that like, you know, doctors have to memorize a lot of stuff. You can do that. So you don't have to give a specific experience as in like helped a deaf customer have a better experience. But instead you could say prioritized accessible service or something, you know? So in general, whatever is the overarching theme of the experiences you can put, but I'd say get specific to like stuff that is special about this role that might be helpful, especially to being a doctor. So this one is a little bit over for characters. So I just want to show some examples of how you can save characters, and I will show a list after. So you can do 150 characters max. So here I just reworded it a bit, added some acronyms, like I changed with to W, and I added a plus instead. If you go back to here, change the and, took initiative building engaging customer relationships, changed the built engaging customer relationships with initiative, and that saved characters. So like you can play around with your words. And like Ferme was saying, think about specific stuff that's special to this role. Like I could have added here, building engaging customer relationships with diverse individuals, like maybe emphasizing how diverse your crowd was. So here are some common acronyms that I've come across. So this one was my personal fave, required, because sometimes I didn't know how to word things. So I just like required, and then I'd go into like the unique skills I built. But these are some very basic acronyms. I'd say any well-known acronym you can use. Patient, PT, that's very well known. Communication being calm, dot, that's a bit less known, but I used it. But like things like Faculty of Science, this is a very well-known acronym, or uni, or so, month, year. Always use this and. You know, save those 2 characters. If you need to get rid of some punctuation, goodbye. You don't need commas. You need to highlight more things. And then if you really need to, you can remove a space between any and or plus to save characters. And when I was editing people's, I found it very easy to edit people's on Google Sheets because you can share it with someone easily. And there's also like, you can add how many character counts there are with the function. So it's like pretty easy to see if you're under the limit, etc. So I'd say write it on the spreadsheet and then put it into OMSAS later, because it'll get really confusing if you do it only on OMSAS. If you're stuck on what to write, I don't promote the use of ChatGPT for writing your ABS, but I promote it as the use of inspiration. So this is a prompt example. I was a blank at blank. In this role, I blank. Using CanMeds as the foundation, give me a list of unique and special things I learned or gained from this role to highlight on my mid-school application. So this part, in this role, I insert your responsibilities. I want you to like vomit out everything you've ever done for this role. You know, maybe ChatGPT will pick up something you didn't, a connection. So I will show an example of how I use this prompt. I didn't add much detail, so you would add a lot more. But for example, I was a volunteer with the Canadian Institute for the Blind. In this role, I used to visit a woman every Friday and help her with basic tasks like cooking, choosing her outfits, blah, blah, blah. Use the CanMeds to highlight traits. So then it gave me a whole list. So here it talks about learned how to build trust and rapport with the patient through regular and empathetic communication. Honestly, this is a good point. Like with someone that's blind, it's hard to build trust and rapport. Learned how to build sensitive trust with, or learned how to build trust with sensitive populations. It might be something you say, or like the bold, for example, are like good things I would write, like became more aware of medication adherence, role of social support. I don't know. This just will give you some inspiration if you're really stuck. The way the ABS is written, and I'm going to show more examples, it's like ChatGPT can't really do it for you because it's just 150 characters. It's just so short. So before I go to the examples, just some reminder that do not copy any of these. These are directly from my ABS. So I'm being gracious enough to show you examples. But I hope you don't take advantage of that. And even just like copying a few words in a row can be caught for plagiarism. So just be careful. So starting off, sales associate. I worked at Adidas. Organize and order clothing. Aid customer with needs. Honestly, if I go back, that's not the best. Aid customer with needs, like what needs? Represent brand. You know, this is showing like professionalism without me saying. Required strong communication with non-English speaking tourists. So I worked at an outlet where we literally used to have like a bus from the airport come to this outlet. So I wanted to highlight that I had to do a lot of speaking with people that didn't know any English, and I had very long hours. So this is what I wrote for working at Adidas. This is for a camp I volunteered at. Mentored students and leaders in training on skill. Mentored students plus leaders. Oh, mentored students plus leaders in training on skill building. I think did not really need the leaders in training. I could have just said students. Mentored students on skill building. And maybe I would add what skill on leadership skill buildings. Well, I add that later. Led workshops on leadership and rapport, led discussions on sensitive topics. Honestly, this is like almost 3 years old now. So that's why I'm also like looking at it and like, I'm like, I could make suggestions. But I just want to show you like what I put back then, you know. So I think I did get specific that like I didn't just say I led workshops, I said on what, but I think I could have gone even more specific. Like this one, volunteered in PACU. So PACU is post-anesthesia care unit, but for any medical abbreviation like ICU, PACU, NICU, I would say you don't have, like, you can assume the person knows it. And then as you can see, I had to let go of some spaces here, but that's okay. Develop clinical skills, workflow knowledge, communicate with patients, families, allied health, ease emotional distress. So yeah, a little quick blurb. And the OMSAS application opened already. So your ABS is something that you should ideally start working on as soon as possible. If you want to get it reviewed, I would say definitely try and get it reviewed by some sort of healthcare student or some sort of healthcare professional.
Exactly.
And I'd say just be wary of certain websites that are very well known, like BMO or Accepted Together, because they charge an insane amount. Like I think it's like 200 or 300 to edit your thing, and you can definitely find people to do it for cheaper. Unfortunately, with a lot of med students, physicians, dentists, our time is just so limited, and it's not possible for us to review stuff without putting a price on it, because it's just a way to regulate how we can control how many we're doing. But we've tried to make it reasonable. But if the price is something that is difficult for you to meet, I definitely am aware, and so is Sormay, that there's a lot of social determinants getting into med school, so, or any school. So you can just reach out to us, and it's also written on our website if the cost is an issue. But yeah, like Sormay mentioned, we can edit your ABS as well.
And
Yeah.
just in addition to that, like as you guys are going through your applications and, you know, getting interviews and etc., we do offer interview prep. And we do go through questions that are quite similar to the format. And even if you have like a format that's kind of like the Kira format that's online, we do have a solution for that to get you guys an authentic experience and get you super comfortable and confident for your interviews. So yeah, do check out the website to see all the different sessions and formats that we offer. Actually, we do have 100% acceptance rate. So you should take advantage of that. And like, you already did all the hard work, and if you got to the interview, it's kind of like so annoying to lose it at that point in time. So, well, we're trying to like host another online series like this, where we are going to do like a group session where people can come and gain kind of general advice into how to do better in their interviews. And that's going to be happening after this one. So I guess like October and November, when the interviews are happening.
Oh, perfect.
But also, if you want a private one-on-one session that's going to be tailored to your specific application or your specific interview, whether you're going to Western or U of T, Dalhousie.
Like somebody mentioned, like the personal statement workshop that's happening, if you're applying to U of T or TMU, anything Western, then that would be really helpful, because they have essays, and I think they play a big role in getting in. And so with that, just a reminder, we have this workshop series going on, and so May spent a lot of time writing everything we know onto like a workbook, so that you have a written resource as well. And I will be sending the link to this presentation. But now it is just the end and time for general Q&A. So thank you. I will stop sharing, and you can either raise your hand, unmute,